In this video, we will show you how to replace your front brake pads and rotors on this Ford Flex. This will be located behind each of your front wheels. Let's get into it. Okay friends, let's get started on our job. The first thing you want to do is safely raise and support the front of your vehicle so the wheel's off the ground with the suspension hanging. Once you've done that, continue on to removing all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Now that we have the wheel out of the way, the next thing we're going to do is push back the 2 caliper pistons. To do that, we'll use a small pry bar. Inside of this area of the caliper, we want to try to grab onto the pad or the rotor and just gently pry this back. Now once you have both of those pistons pushed in, you should be able to move this around. Next, we'll move along to removing each of our 17mm headed slider pins. Those hold the caliper to the bracket. We'll leave this in a little bit. Remove the upper one. Now, as you remove the slider pins, it's important to make sure that you pay close attention to each of them. One of your slider pins, at the very tip, you're going to find that you have a rubber vibration dampener. That should be the upper slider pin. Keep that in mind for during the installation process. You want to make sure you have this back in the same exact spot as when you had removed it. Now we can remove the caliper and give it a close inspection. We're paying attention to each one of the caliper pistons. Around it, there should be a protective boot. If you see any fluid coming out from around these pistons or the boots, that's more than likely brake fluid, and you would have to replace the caliper. Assuming it looks good, let's set this aside, putting no pressure on the flex hose. Now we can move along to removing our brake pads. As we remove these, it's always a good idea to give them a close inspection to make sure they're not worn at an angle. That would indicate there's a braking issue, possibly with those caliper slider pins or the pistons themselves. Next, we can move along to removing the caliper bracket from the steering knuckle. Looking along the back side of the knuckle, you're going to find that you have 2 18mm headed bolts. Remove the pair. Remove your caliper bracket and set it aside. A quick note is when you're doing this, you don't necessarily have to completely disassemble the caliper. You can just make your way to the back side of the knuckle and remove your 2 18mm headed bolts that hold the caliper with bracket to the knuckle and then swing the whole thing aside. We like to take it apart so we can clean and inspect everything thoroughly. Now we can start removing the brake rotor from the wheel bearing. On these brake rotors, you're going to find that you have a T40 torque screw holding the rotor to the wheel bearing. We'll remove that and the rotor. Set that aside. Now that we have that brake rotor out of the way, let's go ahead and clean up the mating surface on our wheel bearing hub. We'll use some parts cleaner and a wire brush. Now let's make our way over to the bench. We're going to clean and inspect the mounting bracket for the caliper. When we do this, you want to carefully remove each one of your slider pin boots. Once you have it off, go ahead and take a rag. We'll give it a quick twist and slide it right on through the center of the slider pin boot. With that through there, we'll just roll it around, trying to remove any of the dirt, grease, or debris that's located inside of this. Once you feel as though you have it clean, just give it one more quick inspection to make sure it's not torn, worn, or damaged in any way, and set that aside. Do the same to the other slider pin boot. Now we can move along to our caliper bracket tins. We'll carefully pry these out of place. For this, you can use a small pry bar or even a small screwdriver. It's always a good idea to give these a close inspection. Now we can pull the rest of these off. At this point, we can start cleaning everything up. All 4 of the areas that had those tins need to be clean and free of any debris, especially any raised areas, because that will cause an issue where the brake pads could get caught in here and cause brake drag. To clean this, we'll just use a small wire brush. There we are. This looks good. I'll do the same on the other side. Now that we have all 4 corners cleaned, let's continue on. Over a collection bucket, let's make sure that we clean each one of our caliper slider ports. We'll use some parts cleaner and a small bore brush. Let's give those a quick rinse, give them an inspection, and then we can continue on with some lubricant. Have a peek inside each one of the ports. Make sure you don't see any grease or foreign debris. As far as using the lubricant, we're going to come inside each of one of the 4 areas on the caliper bracket that have those tins. Now we can continue on to our caliper bracket tins. When you're looking at these, you want to try to find 2 that have the flat area facing down and the little nub facing out. We'll find 2 that have it facing out to one side and 2 that have it facing out towards the other. When we put these in place on the caliper bracket, we want the tab that protrudes out facing away from the braking rotor. Slide that right in there. Give it a wiggle to make sure it's secure. Do the same to all. The next thing we'll do is clean each one of our slider pins. Give the shaft a quick inspection, make sure it doesn't look rotted or pitted in any way. That will obstruct the ability for the caliper to do its job. Just write this one down as well. Double check the one with the vibration dampener. Make sure it's still on there and it's not cracked or swollen in any way. This one looks fine. Now we can use some more of that high temperature caliper lubricant and we'll come right inside the center of each one of these ports. Continue on to your caliper slider boots. Slide it in there, give it a twist, make sure it's secure. All right, now that we have the tins and the caliper slider boots installed, let's get back over to the vehicle. The next thing that we want to do is use some copper never-sees on the mating surface of the bearing hub. All right, let's get that brake rotor on here. When you do so, you want to make sure that you align your mounting bolt hole. Start in that T40 torque screw. And then snug it up, making sure that the rotor is held in place up against the wheel bearing. Let's get that caliper bracket in here. We'll install those mounting bolts. It's a good idea to use a little bit of thread locker on the threads. Make sure you start each of these in by hand so you're sure they are not cross-threading into position. Now we can tighten each of these and then torque them to 111 foot-pounds. Now we can install our brake pads. We'll take these and put them in position in the bracket. They should want to slide right in and move around freely. If you have to force them in, or worse, use a hammer, you need to go ahead and clean up that bracket. We'll use some more of that high temperature caliper lubricant. Lubricate each one of the 2 caliper pistons and the backside of each of the 3 ears. This will help with vibration dampening and noise reduction. Let's get this caliper and slide it in place. Next, we can lubricate each one of our 2 caliper slider pins. Keep in mind, one of them does have the vibration dampener on it, and that one will need to be the top pin. Let's lubricate the shaft on each one of these and down into the lip, closest to those threaded areas. We'll get the top one with the vibration dampener into place. Should want to slide right in. Start that in by hand. Do the same to the lower slider pin. Bottom those out and then torque them to 53 foot-pounds. All right, at this point, we can reinstall our wheel. We'll start on each one of our 19mm lug nuts, snug them up, get the wheel back on the ground, and then torque them to 100 foot-pounds. With the wheel safely back on the ground, we'll torque each of these in a crisscross manner. torqued. Okay friends, we showed you how to install one side of your front brakes. At this point, make your way over to the other side of the vehicle and repeat the process. After that, get inside the passenger compartment, pump up that brake pedal till it's nice and firm, and then take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.